Well, hello again. This is Gary Davis, and I'm going to make a couple of remarks about week 7 of Policy, Politics, and Law of Higher Education. We are coming down the back stretch now, and really I think the best way to pull all of the elements of the course together, other than in the final paper, which we'll be talking about next week, is to look at the role of the president. In your text, American Higher Education in the 21st Century, the authors of the chapter dealing with the president's role describe it as well nigh an impossible one in the current environment. The Dilemma of Presidential Leadership is the chapter that I hope you'll have some time to read this week. It's chapter 12, and one of the headings I noticed in the chapter under the presidential role is on page 345. The president's job is described as the impossible job. The reason that it's described as an impossible job is because of all the pressures on the president. The president plays a pivotal role in the internal governance of the institution, how decisions are made within the college or the university. The president is also the lightning rod for the outside world and the board. So in terms of external governance, governance by a board of trustees or board of control, whatever it's called, a board of visitors, the president is the one who advises the board and then takes the board's instruction and tries to bring into being the results that the board wants without violating any of the things the board doesn't want to have happen. That makes the president's job particularly difficult because the fact is the president is buffeted in so many different ways by so many different forces. And I think we've seen that from the very beginning of the course. There are laws that the president may not have written, the board may not have written, but still those laws affect the governance of the institution. Legislation, once it's in place, whether it be local or state or federal, does affect what the board can do and what the president can do with the board in terms of changing the university to make it more responsible to its ownership, whatever that ownership happens to be. That's not the end of it. The president and the board are also influenced by the alumni, by donors, by other universities, the higher ed community. That's part of what influences boards and presidents. There's also the employer community. As employers change their expectations for college graduates, the college or the university will have to change too. And the president and the board are reacting to all of these pressures, not to forget either the external agencies that you looked at earlier in the course. There are many external agencies ranging from the NAACP to the NCAA, all of whom want changes made within the university, and the president is charged with the responsibility of making those changes without violating the expectations of other agencies or requirements of the law or expectations of donors and alumni, and so on and so on. That's why the president's job is described as pretty much an impossible job. And then there's change, which is part of the name of your program. As the environment changes, the university and the college has to change too, or else simply it will cease to exist. Universities for 1,000 years were marked by their stability and their static natures and their unwillingness to change. Now we're starting to see the effects of that. Some universities and colleges are literally out of business because they haven't changed to meet the demands of the future. One of the ways to summarize what we are learning in week 7 is to have you answer some questions in the form of an assignment that's due on Sunday, where you'll describe an approach that you would recommend for a particular master's level institution in terms of its strategic planning. If the president and the board want a strategic plan that prepares the institution for the future, how would you go about doing that? Who would play what role in the strategic plan? And what sort of outcomes from the strategic plan might you expect? The assignment is due on Sunday night. One of the first things that I might do if I were you and taking this course is to Google just the term strategic plan or strategic planning and see what it says. I'm not looking for any sophisticated approach, just a conventional approach will do. Oftentimes strategic planning is summarized in 4 steps, looking for strengths, looking for weaknesses, looking for opportunities and threats. When a strategic planner or planning team is preparing a blueprint for the future, a strategic plan for the future, it often looks internally at strengths and weaknesses of the organization. There are some things that organizations just can't get over. It's inherent in the nature of the organization. A university, for example, is, if it's like most universities, heavily influenced by faculty opinion. So employee-driven decision-making is part of the university's nature. In some senses, that's a strength, because the employees take a very strong feeling of ownership in the organization, in the university. In some ways it's a weakness because in order to make a decision you have to involve a lot of people. That's why colleges and universities traditionally are governed, as far as their internal governance is concerned, by committees. The problem with committees is they're slow in forming, slow in functioning, not always accountable for their actions. Committees come into being, make decisions that go out of existence, and if the decision wasn't a good one, it's hard to track down the members of the committee who made the original decision in the first place. So the committee-oriented nature of decision-making of a university could be classified as both a weakness and a strength. In terms of the external environment, we look for opportunities and threats, things that are happening out there that are making it possible for us to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do before. I call those surfing the high wave or the great wave, and avoiding the tsunami at the same time. When a trend tends to sweep you along in the direction you want to go, that's an opportunity. The explosion of the internet, for example, has provided a lot of opportunities for colleges and universities to do things that were unimaginable 25 years ago. Those are opportunities. The threats are that perhaps it's difficult to keep up with the cost of advancing technology. And those who don't keep up with the cost of advancing technology, both in terms of the machines and the training to use the machines, will fall by the wayside. So the advance of modern technology, particularly in communications, particularly in the internet, could be classified as both an opportunity and a threat. Those are the kinds of things that you look for. And then what you try to do when you're doing a strategic plan is to position your organization so that it can draw from its strengths and not rely on its weaknesses. If a basketball team, for example, is very tall but kind of slow, you want to play a half-court game. You don't want to get into a running game. If you're slow, you don't expose yourself to your own internal weakness. Instead, you try to structure the game so that it turns on your strength. In terms of the outside environment, the external environment, things that you can't control from within, things that are just out there, that are givens, you look to move at times of opportunities and you hunker down at times of threat. You try not to expose yourself to the tsunami or threat that could wipe you out, this external force. You either move to the side or you hunker down. In terms of opportunities, when something is moving in the right direction, you jump on that moving train and let it take you in the right direction. That's an opportunity that you didn't create, but that you might be able to take advantage of. Okay, well, that's the nature of strategic planning. A lot of colleges don't have modern approaches to strategic planning. Instead, the strategic plans just function as a wish list, kind of an unrealistic wish list, and they don't have the power to change an institution, to get it into conformity with real opportunities, to protect it from real threats, to take advantage of real strengths while not exposing the institution to the downside of its inherent weaknesses. But when institutions can do all those things, can take advantages of internal strengths and compensate for inherent and unavoidable weaknesses, riding the good wave and avoiding the tsunami, then the institution can prosper. Now let's suppose the board's interested, and that's what the assignment assumes, the board's interested in getting a new strategic plan that is practical and that will bear fruit and that can be tied to the budget process. The question is, who's going to do it? There are two general approaches to strategic planning in higher education. One is to use outside consultants, the other is to do it from inside. One of the things that I think I might do if I were taking this course is to try to answer the questions in the assignment. The first question is, do you want this done by an outsider, the strategic planning, or do you want to do it from inside? I would try to answer all the questions in the assignment first, just rough out my answers, not spending a whole lot of time with the draft. And then I would go to the readings for the week and see if the readings turned any lights on or off for me. Are there things that you would change in your response, in your submission, because of what you read? Again, the questions are, should the planning be done from the outside by a consultant who comes in and studies the institution objectively, or should it be done from the inside? And then what constituencies would be involved in the planning, and how would they be involved, and what would the shape of the strategic plan be as you see it coming together? The readings will expose you to a lot of pitfalls in an assignment like this, writing a strategic plan. And I guess it's better to know what the pitfalls are before you're actually charged with this kind of assignment, as you will be probably in your academic administrative careers. In this week, we're going to have a chance to give it a dry run to sort of practice the approach to strategic planning in a trainer, so that if we make any mistakes, we can catch those mistakes before we're actually charged with the actual assignment in our future careers. One of the problems that you'll read about is the rogue trustee. Sometimes the board has an ulterior motive when it's asking for a strategic plan. There's somebody on the board that wants to, for instance, elevate the institution to Division I athletics. They already know the answer, they know the solution, they know what kind of strategic plan they're looking for. And if they don't get their way, they become subversive on the board, undercutting not only the president but the other board members. That can be a problem. There's a reading in your assignments for the week that talks about the rogue trustee and some of the approaches that an administrator can take if that's the challenge. There's another reading called Fireproofing Your Board that speaks to the same problem. There are lots of readings on shared governance, since shared governance is the nature of American higher education. Shared governance will surely play a part in the approach that you take to strategic planning or writing a new strategic planning for your board. There's a description of some governance models for not-for-profits, such as universities. Policy governance is one of them, but there's also a description of the entrepreneurial model, the constituency representative model, and the emergent cellular model. You might take a look at that and see if any of those approaches to governance might figure into the strategy that you're recommending for the institution for the future. There are some keys to healthy board-president relationships. Whatever you come up with in terms of an approach to strategic planning, you want to make it the kind of thing that builds trust between the president and the board, and then between the faculty senate and the institution, including its president and board. There's a reading called Challenges that talks about this current status of faculty senates, the fact that they feel powerless in many of these areas, including the strategic planning for the institution. And there are some suggestions as to how that kind of trust might be enhanced between the faculty who are represented by the faculty senate, or maybe by the faculty union, and the president and the board. There's some advice for the new administrator that I think is an excellent article. I hope you'll read that because I think it'll come in handy when you take your next job. Talks about learning the lay of the land within an institution that's not familiar to you. And you might, if you're using an external consultant, insist that the external consultant spend some time getting to know the heart, the soul, the conscience of the university before proceeding with the processes that lead to the strategic plan. There's an article about adjuncts, or increasingly adjuncts are being relied upon by colleges in order to staff the courses that they offer. And the fact is, a lot of adjuncts don't feel much of a sense of ownership with the institution. How will the adjuncts figure into this strategic planning process? There's an article from the Harvard Business Review that talks about how much involved in the detail the board needs to be when it comes to planning for the future. There's an article called Defining Moments that talks about the need sometimes to bend the rules just a bit in order to make the organization sustainable and lively. The article called Challenges for Governance, a National Report, does have, as I mentioned already, a list of findings regarding the faculty's feeling about governance of an institution, including strategic planning. And there's some recommendations on page 11 that I think might be helpful to you, as well as on page, well, there are two pages, and I have only page 11 here with me right now, but I think the next one is page 12. There are not only findings from the research that's been done on the faculty's involvement in planning for the future of the university, but also some specific recommendations as to how the planning can be done in a way that increases the faculty's confidence in the future of the university. I'll tell you what, I'll send you an email on that and give you the exact page number. I'm sorry I don't have it right now. There's also in your reading assignments a statement of government on colleges and universities. This was published in 1966, Statement of Government of Colleges and Universities, published by the American Association of University Professors, an often discussed document because it talks about roles. What is the role of the board in decision making, particularly related to the future? The president's role, what is that? What should the faculty's role be, and so on. I think if you read through that, you'll see at least how a preeminent institution representing American faculty think it ought to be done. Don't feel that you have to agree with the American Association of University Professors in the approach that you take. You may want to take a different approach. Some who criticize the AAUP's approach say it's cumbersome and collegial to a fault, but I'll let you make the decision of whether or not that criticism is true, or whether you agree with it or not, as you put together your recommendations for how the university in question, this fictitious mid-level university, master's level university, is to proceed now that the president and the board have decided that it needs a new strategic plan. Well, that's the approach for this week. I hope you understand why we're using this assignment. It gives you a chance to pull in what you know about higher ed law, higher ed policy making, collective bargaining, shared governance, and all of the other themes that we've touched on up to this point. In the end, I'm looking for a recommendation that is yours and not mine. So if you take an approach that's different than the one I would take, there's no harm in that at all. It's all a matter of how well you structure and support the recommendations that you're making. In other words, tell me not only what you're recommending, but why you're recommending it and why you think your approach will work. Looking forward to seeing your papers next Sunday night. Today is the 20th, so that will be about the 27th when I take a look at your finished products, and I will try to get those grades to you as soon as I can. The next week, you have only one assignment, really, and that is to prepare this final paper. And when you get back to this spot a week from today, we'll talk a little bit more about the final paper and how it can, again, help you to pull together the elements of the course. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for letting me know about the problems you were having with the DVD, the Maloney DVD. I think 2 or 3 of you may still not have it, and I'm going to make sure that you get it. You did get a summary, though, of the high points, and that should enable you to complete your assignment tonight on Sunday the 20th. And if you need a little extra time and because you didn't get the DVD, be sure to take it. I just don't want you to get too far behind in the course so you don't have enough time to do the strategic planning assignment for week 7 and be ready to tackle the final paper, which is a 200-point paper for week 8. In week 8, you won't be doing any extra reading. It's just a matter of designing the paper that you want to design and executing it. So you'll have a little extra time. Not so much input, mostly output on your part as a way of demonstrating what you've learned in policy, politics, and law of higher education. That's it for now. Again, if you would need anything during the week to help you complete this assignment for week 7, please let me know, and I'll do the best I can to help.